Well, good morning, and I hope that you'll take your coffee with Town and County magazine. The new one is just going to the printers, so it will be out in a couple of weeks' time. Well, not, what less than that, a few days. And once again, I think some interesting, if controversial, articles there. And this is Mirador Television. I'm Keith Hayes. That was a new intro. And for those of you who wonder who the lovely lady is in that intro, that is Melissa Winton, who is Melissa Conti, as we know her professional name. Melissa Conti, who is our New York producer. She looks after our website, and she digs up all sorts of people for us to consider talking to over the next little while, as we try to link, if you like, Lewes, Delaware, with Lewes in East Sussex in the UK, and that's where we're broadcasting from this morning, is from Lewes. Now, I'm at the castle, and let me just give you a little peek at part of the castle. There, it's a very fine barbican, actually, one of the best examples in the country, and one of the most modern, believe it or not, because those little sort of lips or edges that you can see there are so that the defenders could pour oil or potato peelings or whatever down onto the attacking forces. And there weren't many built that way, despite what you may have seen in the movies, and this was one of them. And this is one of the oldest castles in the UK, one of the first that was built by the Normans, and whenever I feel like talking democracy, because I really am fearful for it, this is where I come to remind myself that the Battle of Lewes was the first spark of English democracy. And while we call it the mother of parliaments, indeed it has become that. But it started because of the battle that was waged around this very castle where I'm sitting. And if I want to be reminded about the blood that was spilled, the effort that was made to get some form of democracy going, not democracy as we know it. It was the barons who wanted to say in the governance of England, and they said to the king, "Hey, come on, we want a say, and particularly since you're spending our taxes," and that's really how it all started. So not necessarily democracy, as I say, as we know it, but I wonder whether democracy today is as we know it. What I've watched the squabbles and the nonsense that goes on in Westminster amongst a ruling elite who have really totally lost the plot when it comes to why they're there. They have totally forgotten what they're about. They're representing the people of the country, and that we want them to represent in a way which we can understand, not the gobbledygook which they offer. I watched Piers Morgan with a lady MP, I won't tell you which party, just a lady MP last night, who kept arguing that black was white and red was yellow and lies were truth, and vice versa. Reminded me of that famous play, 1984 by George Orwell. All animals are equal. Some are more equal than others. That was his others, Animal Farm. And we seem to be in this surrealistic world where nothing is as it should be. And people have written novels about it, and here we are sitting in the middle of it. And it worries me enormously, because I think that we've got carried away with the same thing. If you read some of the comments, particularly when people get into rows about Brexit, is one will say, "Oh, all the lies that were spewed out," and then immediately give out a bunch of non-substantiated facts. And then the other side will come back and do exactly the same thing. So it doesn't matter whether you're in or out. They're just as bad as one another. But what is perfectly obvious is that none of these people who are telling us what we should do and what we shouldn't do, and what's right and what's wrong, and who's saying lies, and so on and so forth. And once again, Brexit didn't win it after all. It was all the Remainers. The fact of the matter is that none of them have read the treaties. None of them have looked at what really the issues are. To me, the issue is quite different. I've worked and lived in authoritarian countries, and when I see what's happening
with the EU, what worries me is that without substantial change, that's exactly what the EU is going to become, an authoritarian country, and a country of 27 or 30 constituent parts who'll have very little say in their future, very little say on what goes on. It will all go back to central government, and that I find frightening. And I find it frightening when we do that locally, because that's what the cabinet is all about. The idea of a cabinet in local government is that you hand over authority to 3 or 4 people who work in conjunction with the chief executive of the administration, and they call the shots. Yeah, to some extent they have to go back once in a while to something which resembles Parliament, in other words, a council meeting, a full council meeting, and explain their actions. But you know, there are a bunch of pussycats in there. Nobody ever says boo. Well, 1 or 2 do, but not very many. And because it's party politics, when the leader says, they pull the string and says, vote this way, and they do, they vote that way, and they pull the string, the hands go up, and then the opposition do exactly the same thing, and the hands go up. Or perhaps I could use the other hand. And really, as far as local government is concerned, and as far as I'm concerned, democracy is dead. Now, when the barons took on King Henry III in 1264 in the Battle of Lewes, part of which took place, as I said, here at the castle, one of the things that they managed to do was to spark democracy. They didn't change it overnight. They managed a spark of democracy. And I see a spark of democracy coming back if people will stop playing politics and get their act together. Because the Conservatives had 19 seats, and the combined opposition had 22 seats. And guess who elected the leader of the council? The Conservatives. And then I think there was a lot of soul-searching and a lot of name-calling. It was the Lib Dems said it was all the fault of the Greens said it was fault of Labour said it was fault of the Independents said it was the fault of the Lib Dems. I mean, you couldn't make it up. Once again, we got a Brian Rix farce going. But if in fact they can, it seems that perhaps they're going to have some sensible discussions to make sure that there is a reasonable opposition in place, perhaps the cabinet will not have all the powers that it had for the last 4 years. Because what happened in the last 4 years was totally in line with what happened in Westminster, and that is a complete breakdown of the governance, not of government, but of governance, of the way that these people actually ruled us, governed us. And they didn't do a very good job. They didn't do a very good job in Westminster for the nation. They didn't do a very good job in Lewes and district for the people here. But the only saving grace is that the EU didn't do a very good job either, but then they never do. And the Americans got themselves into a bit of a twist. And if we want to go to the other 2 superpowers, Russia and China have got their own problems. So the people who purport to be our leaders and to have the qualities and the ability to do so have been found out. They were found out by circumstance. They were found out by the demands of people. Now, I say, not very good to look forward to if we've got another 4 years of that. But do we have to have 4 years of it? If there's a decent opposition, they can make demands. And if we're a decent electorate, we can actually start to talk to our local council and say, hey, this is what we think. Please take our views to the council. And let the cabinet know what we think. And then if they go contrary to our wishes, we know who to blame, instead of watching this wild, wild west show that is taking place at all levels of governance. So perhaps there is a spark of democracy. Perhaps me coming up to the castle has given me a little bit more hope that we, the people, not an English phrase, an American one, of course, but we, the people, the American Constitution, but in Britain, we, the people, are at long last getting a voice and demanding. Not if you want to go into the silly debates on Facebook and YouTube and all the other debatable websites, social websites. No. They really are taken up by people in the main who just spout out nonsense. Not all of them. There are some people who actually do think. There are some people who actually do their research. There are some people who actually have read the treaties that I talked about earlier. But they're in the minority. And actually people tend to poo-poo them. They know who they are, and I stand with them. And I hope that in the debates they can be a voice of reason and a voice of calm. Nobody listens to me because I'm a ranter. All I do is I yell and shout and wave my arms. But perhaps what I can do is I can steer you to some rational thought by rational people who do it on the basis of evidence, not of emotion. Nothing wrong with emotion, the right places. Oh, believe it or not, look at that face, but it's been kissed in its time. So it's a great place for emotion. But it ain't in politics. Not at all. Those people who call the shots have got to know why they're calling the shots and what they're doing. And while it's important for them to listen to our voice, they must be the sane, rational voice that understands the issues, that has looked at the treaties, that have made up their minds to either urge withdrawal or urge a no-deal exit, have thought it out carefully and clearly, and not just worried about whether they can travel over the continent without a passport, or whether we'll get Spanish tomatoes, or French champagne. No, the wine growers of England would love us not to have French champagne because they do a very decent upon themselves. The only thing is, for the life of me, I do not understand why they don't boast about it. But there we are, they don't, and that's up to them. They're their own marketeers, they understand their industry. I don't, I just drink it. Anyway, are there other things? No, I think what we'll be doing next week is we like to not dwell on politics all the time, but we are the watchdog. What we hope is that next week that this television station will start to dwell a little bit more on the history, not only of this town, but of the surrounding area. It's amazing if I ask people, have they heard of the Battle of Haywards Heath? And very few have. And yet it embraced this town and Haywards Heath in the English Civil War. Oh, come on, Haywards Heath wasn't there before the trains, they say. Oh, yes, it was. And it was the site of a very important battle. Because if the Royalists had won it, they were here to take Lewis, and they were here to attack the Newtons, who were solid Puritans and Cromwellians, who lived in South Evergrange. That would have altered history, because if the king had got influence in this part of the country, he would have probably defeated the Cromwellians, and we would not have had a republic. Was it a good thing for us to have a republic? History, I think, probably says it was a good breather before we went back to a monarchy, and the monarchy has been staunch ever since. And while we've had some odd monarchs, we've established now, along with, I hope, sensible democracy, which has got to be around the corner somewhere, a very solid monarchy that represents us as the head of state much better than an elected one would, and in fact much better than an elected one does. And look at all the people that, it's not their business really, but look at all the people that have decided to get into the act about whether President Trump should come. He's president, for God's sake. Forget about who he is, he's president. But people don't think that way about the royal family, do they? Oh no, you can't insult them. They are our ambassadors abroad. Yes, they are. They're our head of state. And they are treated normally with a great deal of respect, whether people are royalists, nonconformists, revolutionists, or republicans. We should do the same. But first of all, let's start to respect our own parliament, our own local council. But in return, they need to respect us. Not bad for Thursday morning. See you tomorrow. Till then, toodle-pip.